Frontier Precision, Integrated Land Services, Hexagon, the Wyoming Geographic Information Science Center, and One Spatial. And with that, I will turn it over to Dave and Shelby, who are going to be talking about ArcGIS Enterprise topics. Take it away.
Hey, thanks, Nick. This is Dave Vaillancourt, and before we get started, I'd love to just take a minute and introduce ourselves, or introduce us. I'm a solution engineer here located in our Louisville office, our Esri Denver office. I'm on our local government team, so I work with local governments, counties and cities and towns, primarily in Colorado these days. And with me is also Shelby Hines. Shelby, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, you bet. Can you hear me, Dave?
I can hear you great, yeah.
Okay, great. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining. My name's Shelby Hines. I work alongside Dave out of the Esri Denver office, and I also support local governments in New Mexico and Colorado as well. Glad to be here.
Yeah, so we're excited to be here to talk about ArcGIS Enterprise and with you all. And this presentation is we were originally planning on doing it, in person, obviously, and we're going to have a little bit of hands-on stuff, a little bit of exercises. But we thought we'd in this situation, because we're doing it virtually, and because we've got some folks with varying levels of sort of exposure to some of this technology, we thought we'd approach it a little differently. And so it's called an introduction, but it's really a different kind of introduction. Shelby and I have been talking about ArcGIS Enterprise for a while, and it seems like we always start with it by getting into kind of the components of it and how they all get installed and what the setup of your ArcGIS or ArcGIS Enterprise organization or portal looks like. And we don't really get into actually the capabilities. It sort of seems like we kind of leapfrogged a lot of stuff in our discussion. So we want to sort of take a step back and approach it from a different angle, approach it from sort of a fresh perspective, and not focus so much on the components and the installation and where things go, but more on the capabilities and using those capabilities and kind of thinking about it alongside of ArcGIS Desktop and also ArcGIS Online, kind of, where strengths and weaknesses are with those various products. So if you're new to, if you're familiar with ArcGIS Server, or ArcSDE, or Enterprise Geodatabases, this will be helpful for you. If you are familiar with ArcGIS Online, but not any of that other technology, I think this will also be helpful for you. So I think we've got something for everybody. So let's kind of get moving. One of the things that, let's see, I gotta use a different thing here. Sorry, I got the zoom up. I'm not able, there we go. Now I'm able to fast forward my slides. Sorry, I had a little challenge there with the Zoom meeting. So as I mentioned, we're gonna talk about sort of through capabilities and functionality as opposed to just little features and functions and installations. So the thing we want to kind of conceptualize is how it's foundational, powerful, flexible, and collaborative. And kind of in a sentence, it is powerful because it gives us analytical capabilities delivered in user-friendly ways through web mapping applications, through like insights, or through a web map or a dashboard. There's a lot of flexible ways of getting or accessing information or sharing information with your users through Enterprise. And it's also collaborative in that content is easily shared. There's a very simple and easy to use, understandable sharing model we have built inside of ArcGIS Enterprise, where you have total control of what you share with whom and what access and control those individuals have. It's also flexible because it can be deployed inside your organization, like whether on just straight up servers and virtual machines and cloud environments, combination of all those. And it also ties in seamlessly with all of Esri's technology. I mean, it is really kind of like the cornerstone of WebGIS and our technology. Let's kind of start about with the simple things, kind of about like what is just WebGIS in general and kind of how we got here. WebGIS, to me, and its core kind of concept is not necessarily, is when you're working with GIS or geospatial information. Let's just say geospatial information. We're looking at geospatial data, not necessarily through a thick client where all the data is stored locally on our machine and all the analysis is happening locally on our machine. It's happening in a server environment, in an enterprise environment with distributed computing. So it's more powerful. So here we have our user on the left-hand side on our client machine, looking at maps, looking at crowdsourced information, what have you. They're not actually storing the data locally on their machine. There's situations when we want to do this, obviously, but the commonality is it's not. It's actually being stored and managed through a WebGIS infrastructure, and that's typically going to be either ArcGIS Enterprise on-premise or ArcGIS Online, managed by Esri. We'll kind of talk about those quite a bit today. Some of the advantages you get with that is you get a lot more scalability. You get the better computing power, better resource allocation from a server environment than you do in a desktop environment. And obviously, one of the huge things is you get to share that information. So now when we've got desktop analysts, people doing data science and GIS work, creating and managing and editing and analyzing data, they're sharing it to the portal or the enterprise, rather the WebGIS, and then other people are able to access it. And because it's web enabled, it's much more scalable and gives you a significantly more amount of power behind the scenes. And power is not just compute power. I like to think about power in terms of flexibility and accessibility. Being able, sometimes a WebGIS is powerful because you can access it through a mobile application or through a dashboard. That's a kind of power in addition to just raw compute power. And on the left, let's kind of compare with a desktop scenario with a web scenario and how work is done. In the desktop scenario, you are using like an ArcMap or Arc Pro. Hopefully some of you are starting to use ArcGIS Pro, and you're connecting to maybe an enterprise geodatabase or an SDE geodatabase. So I know personally, most of the folks on this call are using this kind of technology. They're using enterprise or SDE geodatabases effectively, and you've been doing it for many years. That's kind of the first step, and that now the data is not necessarily stored locally. The data is stored on an enterprise server and being backed up, and security is being managed through that environment. The sort of the next step is to distribute that through, instead of the work being done on the local machines, the work is being done on the server down here in the bottom. So these are our servers. This is scalable. This could be 4 cores. This could be 64 cores. It could be one machine, multiple machines. And then we have our data sources here. We'll talk a little bit more about the variety of data sources we can use with enterprise, with managed and unmanaged data sources. But the really important piece of WebGIS is this bit right here. There's this common portal, portal, not necessarily a product like a lowercase, like a capital P portal, but just a general portal, a window into all the shared geospatial content. And that is really, really empowering, because someone who's been doing GIS for a long time, and I know many of you have, the issue is not that we don't have skills to do really cool stuff and manipulate data and do cool analysis. It's always been how we've been able to expose other people to our work and the value of our work. It's in my 17 years at Esri, that's the challenge. It's not how to do it, it's how to share it, how to expose other people, and how to derive more value out of what I did as a GIS expert. So a little tangent there, but the important thing here, the most important piece, is this sort of communal web page or portal where folks can access stuff. Because remember, not everybody where you work is using ArcMap or ArcPro. Some folks don't have those skills, don't need those skills, don't want those skills. Maybe you don't have the licensing to support it. Whatever it may be, you can actually disseminate that information using WebGIS tools very, very effectively. Whether they're using mobile applications like this individual on the left, web mapping applications or dashboards like these folks in the middle, or just a desktop analyst doing more work, providing more data back to the portal. And we see, I mean, I'm really excited recently because the kind of work that we're doing as GIS people suddenly has global reach with this coronavirus, with the dashboards that have been going up. I mean, people are looking at the kind of technology that you're building all the time. They're getting very familiar with it. I'm really excited about where we are now, like as an industry, because we've wanted this period for a long time where people understood what we do. You know, I think most of us 5 years ago, when you had to explain what you did, you'd say, you know, when you're in an airplane, and you don't want to really talk a whole lot, you just kind of say, you know, like I do GIS, kind of like, you know, Google Maps, and they'd be like, oh yeah, I get it. Well, now think about the impact when you can say, you remember that dashboard, that thing that Johns Hopkins put out that had all the COVID data in it? That's what I do. I mean, that's way, way cooler than Google Maps. So I'm excited. I'm excited personally. I'm excited for all of our user base because our work is being elevated significantly. Sorry for the whole tangent and all the Kool-Aid, but I do want to put that out there because I'm really excited about this. I think we all should be and should recognize it. Important little concept here. It's not a replacement for desktop GIS. I remember when we were introducing ArcGIS Online 10 years ago, or whenever it was, 5 to 10 years ago, to the user community. I recall being part of the expos and being part of the rollouts, the seminar series, and there's a lot of concern among the GIS, professional GIS community, that suddenly their work was going to be kind of like just more pedestrian. It's actually more important now. People understand what you do, and a desktop GIS is an essential component of any kind of GIS setup or ecosystem. It's the piece that we really, we're the people who create the content that other folks use. We're the people who manage the content that other folks use, and we're the folks who create the capabilities for other folks to create and manage their own content, which is really empowering. So the whole process of getting you to work when you're doing your desktop work to getting it into a web GIS is just by publishing it or sharing it to the web GIS. And the web GIS can be a couple things, as I mentioned. It can be ArcGIS Enterprise. It can also be ArcGIS Online. We're going to focus more on Enterprise today, but I think your experiences with Online will help you kind of help lend some clarity to this as we go forward. So we're still in the foundational kind of concepts of ArcGIS Enterprise, and I do want to kind of spend a little time talking about how it fits in with our whole stack. This is a super simplified version of our stack, but on the left-hand side, it all starts with a desktop application. Pro, if you haven't used ArcGIS Pro, one of the capabilities that's very powerful is the capability for publishing and sharing content to a web GIS. It takes a lot of the guesswork out of it. ArcMap, you know, ArcMap was built long before we had things like ArcGIS Online. So the sort of sharing components were added over time to ArcMap, and they just kind of became bolted on, along with a lot of other technology. ArcGIS Pro, we started from scratch with a 64-bit app that is built with sharing and with WebGIS in mind. You still have all the powerful tools you have in ArcMap. You just also have the better sharing capabilities. And when you're sharing your content, you can share things to ArcGIS Online or ArcGIS Enterprise. And once that has been done, we'll get into sort of the data locations a little bit later, but let's just say that ArcGIS Enterprise, for all intents and purposes, has access to the data in some capacity. When we're using applications on the right, ArcGIS apps like mobile applications, like a collector, we're not actually copying all the data onto our phone. We're actually just accessing the enterprise data that we've been enabled access to through our applications. So when we're using collector or survey 1, 2, 3, we can be connecting to layers or content coming from ArcGIS Enterprise. In some cases, we're actually providing data back, like using collector. For example, we may be building more information about our water network or about our maintenance activities in the field. All that stuff is actually being stored within the enterprise system. Along all points of this, from the desktop to the web GIS component to the actual, or to the sort of services component to the actual applications, we've got a series of developer tools and applications and APIs and builders and whatnot to access all different points of this particular process. And if some of these applications, for example, over here aren't exactly what you want, I mean, they're not for everybody, they're for most people, but not for everybody. You can also develop your own applications. You can develop your own plugins and capabilities rather for ArcGIS Pro. You can add capabilities to ArcGIS Enterprise and all the applications that hang off of that. So there's a lot of reasons we kind of get, we really feel like ArcGIS Enterprise is extremely powerful. There's a lot of capabilities we'll have. I've kind of broken them down into 3 little sections. One of the core capabilities with Enterprise and with WebGIS in general is that you're able to use spatial content in a web browser. And this ultimately comes from the publishing of web services from a client, you know, whether that is Esri Maps for Office. You can be using Esri Maps for Office to geocode a spreadsheet that would actually create and publish and host and serve that content through a web environment. Or if you're using ArcGIS Pro and you're publishing your parcels or fire perimeters, that's how that works. ArcGIS Enterprise works with all kinds of data inside the web browser, with tabular data, with imagery, with 3-dimensional data, different types of raster classified data. And we can also use the web browser to do basic web mapping and analysis. And I think one of the sort of empowering components or capabilities of Enterprise is the ability to share. This is really cool, and we kind of take this for granted. But if you look back on what you were doing 10 years ago, if you were in this industry 10 years ago, and you think about how you shared your work with people, it was primarily through hard copy map or through maybe a clunky web application, clunky by today's standards. At the time, it was really cool, but now it's probably clunky, where they could click on things and find information just about stuff. Now think about it, how we share and collaborate. We make GIS content available to non-GIS users, not through printed maps in a sort of a clunky lookup application, but we may have people in a fire department using a dashboard looking at calls for service. We may have people, a non-GIS user in the field collecting data about the maintenance history of a fire hydrant, or about the painting of a road, or about repair operations or maintenance to a road or something along those lines. We also may make that same geospatial content available to somebody to use in Insights. So an assessors love the Insights application. They can actually look at a lot of really, really interesting details about the valuation of their properties and whatnot. They don't really want a GIS. They just want a tool where they can look at the data. So this is huge to me, is this thing really on the top right. It's making GIS content available to non-GIS users in the way that they want it and the way that they expect it. We couldn't do that. We could only do that really in 2 ways like a decade ago. And now we can do it in just a variety of ways. And I find that really exciting. And the last set of capabilities about ArcGIS Enterprise is that we can work with really massive amounts of data. We can't really work with massive amounts of data in file geodatabases and inside of ArcMap and inside of ArcGIS Pro. When you're talking about data that's in the billions of points, big data, doing machine learning type applications, you're talking about needing infrastructure to be able to use parallel processing and do some real powerful compute, we'll say, behind the scenes to manage that. And that's something that we can do with ArcGIS Enterprise. We can do significantly more analysis faster. We can work with massive data sets faster. We can work with real-time data. That's actually a huge thing. We can extend ArcGIS Enterprise with a GeoEvent server role so that we can actually work with real-time data or IoT, Internet of Things data. Those are some of sort of the core capabilities. And the thing I want to note is that I don't think any organizations use all these, none that I work with. But many organizations use 2 or 3 or 6 or 4, or whatever that may be. And your role, I feel like, in the long term, is to find, as GIS professionals, is to find ways where you can help your user community, your customers with this, with these different capabilities, whether it's by giving them access to real-time data, or analyzing permits, or bringing in data from sensors, or doing other types of analysis. There's a lot of things that we can do to help our users. So that's kind of sort of the foundational bit of kind of web GIS. And I know that was very kind of basic, but I did kind of want to take us back a little bit. You know, we kind of went from whole hog from desktop to online, and never really thought about kind of what we were doing a lot of times. So I want to turn it over to Shelby now, and Shelby's going to tell us a little bit about kind of what is a web GIS actually look like, Shelby. So I'm going to stop sharing right now.
Okay, cool.
We're gonna go back and forth a few times. So.
All right.
By the way, while Shelby's getting going, if you guys want to, I mean, we'll have a Q&A. There's only a handful of us, 12 or 15 of us on here. We'll have a Q&A session or opening at the end. But if you want to type in questions into the chat window as we go through, we'll address those as we can.
All right, great. Thanks, Dave. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, it looks great.
Okay, cool. Well, thanks so much for kicking us off, Dave. Appreciate the foundation and laying the groundwork. You know, Dave's really been talking about the conceptual framework of ArcGIS Enterprise and what it brings. And I'm going to dive now into what does it really look like? What is it made up of? So let's take a close look at each of these 3 components. These are the components of ArcGIS Enterprise, and when installed and configured and wired together, they create the system that enables all the capabilities that Dave just described that ArcGIS Enterprise brings. So first, top center, is the portal. The portal is accessed through a web browser, and it really is the front end of the system. It's where most of the users will interact with the system. From the portal, you can share and manage content. A lot of times, the content that's been published from your desktop GIS, from ArcGIS Pro. You can also bring in other GIS items that are maybe OGC or other open web services. And then you can produce outputs in the portal. Maps, apps, reports, of course, that, you know, may be relying on analysis. So you can do more than just create sort of that end product, but you can do analysis right there in the portal. Over to the server. The server is really the engine of ArcGIS Enterprise. So this is the component that's doing the heavy lifting in terms of running and hosting the GIS services that are powering the items in your portal. So there's always a service that lives underneath a layer, right? The server also can handle requests using utility services like pan and zoom, and do geocoding, and some simple analysis tools come out of the box. Server's very scalable so that you can allocate resources to different pieces of your system. And then the data store. The data store kind of comes in 2 flavors. One is called the ArcGIS Data Store, and that is a software component that you install and configure with the other 2. You can also use your own data store as part of the system, so you don't have to use the ArcGIS Data Store. Okay, my next couple slides here take a bit of a dive into each of those components. So with the portal, like I said, it's your user interface. This is where you're storing and manipulating data. So end users of a portal can find, use, add, share, analyze, manage data. You can sorry guys. Hold on, let me put myself on mute.
I don't know about the behavior of Shelby's animals there, but mine are sleeping. They're both sleeping on this bed right next to me. They're behaving, but at any moment I could have a complete chaotic situation here.
It's a good thing they can't hear my dog bark.
Yeah, because they would definitely be barking if they heard your dog.
All right, I think we're good now. So you can manipulate data in a portal, create offline map areas maybe for a field workflow so that you can really focus in and narrow down on geographies that need to be taken offline, for example. You can create layer views, which is a really neat concept. It's a view of a data set, kind of like a database view that enables you to create sort of a second copy of a data set and add its own settings and permissions to it. You can work in 2D and 3D in Portal. You have access to applications like Dashboard and Web App Builder and others as if they're licensed. You also have access to the configurable app templates available through Portal. And then of course you have the living atlas of the world in Portal, which is an amazing set of authoritative data that Esri curates and brings together into the living atlas. So it's now in Portal. With ArcGIS Enterprise, it's now in Portal that you're managing users and licenses as opposed to maybe Server Manager from the past. So you're managing the people and the licenses that they have access to. You can configure security through the portal. You can monitor item usage, so you can see how many times an item has been requested. You can create groups to manage content and connect content with users, right? Maybe around a project or a theme or a department. You can categorize content. That's one of the newer capabilities for organizing your content. You can administer collaborations. So this kind of relationship between two portals that can be enterprise and online or enterprise to enterprise. And then of course you can customize the look and feel. You can give it a theme that has colors. You can give it a logo. The theme can include also a logo so that you can have sort of branding that's pushed into every new information product that you build. And then sites and pages are sort of these internal facing websites to create a sort of organized content around a topic or project so that users don't have to go sort of hunting around a portal if they're not comfortable doing that. Okay, so in terms of user types, who's going to be in there and using the portal, and how will they be licensed in terms of their named user account? Well, it was a couple years ago now that Esri transitioned from the level 1 and level 2 users to kind of split them apart and enable you to better tailor the license to the end user and what their needs are. So there's now 5 user types available in ArcGIS Enterprise. This also enables you to be more cost effective with your licensing. Again, just only providing the user with what they need, right? So kind of starting from the left, I can read this slide by saying a viewer license type, or a viewer user type rather, is able to view the ArcGIS Essential Apps. And then moving to the right, the editor has everything that the viewer can do, plus the editor is able to edit ArcGIS Essential Apps. And those include the map viewer, story maps, dashboards, web app builder. And then moving on, you know, the field worker inherits everything that the editor can do and can edit those essential apps plus the field apps bundle. Creator can author, so they can actually author and publish or author and share essential apps, the field apps bundle, and then the office apps bundle. And then the GIS professional is a different user type. That one actually comes with ArcGIS Pro, and then of course has the ability to administer the system and of course author all those different app types. Okay, so moving on to ArcGIS Server. When you're configuring ArcGIS Enterprise, you go through a process called federation. And federating your server with your portal means you're essentially integrating the two software components in terms of security and content. So like I said, you do a lot of the administration out of server. Now, there are still reasons you'll need to get into ArcGIS Server Manager, and that might be to add resources to individual services or tweak individual services. You can still access Server Manager and your services through the ArcGIS REST API. Custom extensions apply to all the developers out there. And then the administrator IP, or the admin API enables access to either manually or programmatically automate admin tasks in ArcGIS Enterprise. Okay, then moving on to the data store. So I mentioned the ArcGIS data store is the software component that's installed and configured as part of this system. And when you publish data into ArcGIS Enterprise, if you select copy, so you're actually pushing your data into the system, it becomes a hosted data set in ArcGIS Enterprise, and it lives in this data store. Now, when you're publishing and you select reference, that data set, that web service is always going to be connected back to its source data. Dave, feel free to jump in if you have anything to add too, please. I mentioned you can still reference your own data, so you can bring your own data and maintain that data in its source location. These are all the different types of user managed data that I'm talking about. So you can have a live link to these various data sets. Of course, you may not need to use all these types of data, just like Dave mentioned with the capabilities of the overall system. I'm not sure there's any customer out there that's using every one of these, but they're there for you. Or the capability is there for you, rather. Okay, this slide is great. It's super helpful for me, at least, to understand sort of how data across the platform has, how it's organized and how the different storage models and properties sort of exist. So this slide shows, how they're related, or as a comparison. Data used in the desktop, for example, drive the data types in server and portal. Okay, so for example, on desktop, you might be working against a feature class, right? Sorry guys, and then you can publish it up to your system, up to your ArcGIS Enterprise system. And that will create a feature service that's hosted by ArcGIS Server, and then a feature layer that is the item in portal that's effectively pointing back to the service. And the layer is what you're going to bring in to your web maps to do, to visualize and apply symbology to and all that good stuff. Another example that I like a lot on this slide is the geoprocessing tool. So on the desktop side, you have your geoprocessing tools in your toolbox, and you're pulling those and applying them to maybe your feature class. When you can create a geoprocessing service, or there are existing geoprocessing services in ArcGIS Server. The way I think about this slide, though, is on the far left, geoprocessing tool, you might, use Model Builder and sort of stitch together a couple tools to run a process. Well, you can create a geoprocessing service out of that model and host it in ArcGIS Server. And then you can build a web tool, which is basically the, for lack of a better word, easy button to run those tools, to run that analysis out of your portal. So you can even plug a web tool like into a web app builder app and easily apply it to the various layers that you have available in your portal. So components of ArcGIS Enterprise, and now we're kind of looking at it in the form of what we call the base deployment. If you've heard of the base deployment, it's of course your portal, server, and data store wired together. And then of course you can also bring in your user managed data. And at this point, I'd like to mention that when you add in the web adapter, you would add in the web adapter, one in front of your portal and one in front of your server. And the web adapter acts as a reverse proxy that sits on your web server in front of those two components. And it lets your admins control the user access to each of the components depending on their purpose, right? So the portal is where analysts and the app builders and the users and the viewers that's kind of their point of entry. And then of course the admins, data manager, maybe a DBA, a developer, can get in and access the server through that web adapter. All right, Dave, I think I'm handing it back to you at this point.
Cool. I will share my screen.
Okay, so I will stop sharing to enable you to do that.
That was cool. I really like that second to last slide that had all the arrows on it. I think that was pretty cool. Actually, very relevant. So as I mentioned early on, we're sort of in talking about sort of the power of ArcGIS Enterprise, and I mentioned it's not really just compute power. It's not just the power of having lots of processors and lots of hardware to do analysis and to do rendering or whatever. It's really about sort of the capabilities behind it and the accessibility behind it. There's some server roles, which we'll get into now, like the geo event server and the image server, that really enable a lot of other capabilities and allow you to do a lot more sort of analysis. But one of the things that's really powerful about Enterprise that I just want to sort of give a shout out to is the content and data management aspects of it, because we really made a system that makes it a lot easier to find what you're looking for and to access it in a way where you can actually really, use it. Let's talk about the server roles, and this is new. This is new to Enterprise. Okay, so and keep in mind that ArcGIS, one thing is a bit of a tangent, but it's kind of important to know. If where you work, you have an ArcGIS server license, or where you work, you're running ArcGIS server, you can upgrade and move to Enterprise. There's no additional licensing to buy from Esri. There's nothing else. Back in the old days, we used to sell server and then portal as two separate things. And now it's all just together. It's all wrapped together in this thing called Enterprise. And you basically choose what to install and choose what to deploy. And what Shelby was talking about is kind of the base deployment with those components, the ArcGIS server, the portal, the data store, and the web adapter. Those components make up the base Enterprise deployment. But let's talk about kind of how we can extend that beyond just the base deployment. And this ArcGIS server, this GIS server role, the thing that you know of and have known as ArcGIS server is there. It's still there. It's kind of the cornerstone of Enterprise. It's the tool for doing all the service publishing, all the analysis and whatnot. This is the role that sort of the default role that's in the base enterprise deployment is the GIS server. But if you get additional licensing from Esri, you can get additional server roles. And what these are ArcGIS servers that are set up with some back-end processing to do a specific thing. They're optimized for something, because the capabilities you need to share, for example, massive amounts of raster data, like imagery, like with image server, is a lot different from the capabilities you need to ingesting big data or data coming in from sensors, like in GeoEvent server. So all these roles these are configurations of ArcGIS server that you lay out when you're installing the components to do a specific task. So we have the image server role, which has been around for a while. I mean, we had this product at 9.1 called the image server, and then it became the extension to ArcGIS Enterprise image extension or something. Now it's called image server again. But what it's come down to is we're in sort of instantiating best practices with the setup of these server roles, these capabilities. So it's always been a good practice to have an image server on a separate machine. But if you're trying to be really thrifty, a lot of times you'll put the image server on the same machine as your ArcGIS server, which really doesn't do a whole lot of good in the long run. So what we've done is we've sort of, I don't want to say forced, but we've directed sort of better practices for installation and setup by having these server roles. And generally, these are going to be on different machines. The GeoEvent server role is, or sorry, not generally, these are going to be on different machines. The GeoEvent server role is one that allows you to ingest real-time data, like notifications from AVL systems or notifications from a gunshot spotter or whatever lightning strikes. The image server I didn't really talk about much, but image server is extremely powerful, and it really allows you to serve massive amounts of raster data in an enterprise environment and have it perform really, really well. It also comes with a variety of tools for analysis and exploration inside of there. And then there's a more recent role called Notebook Server, which is a tool that allows you to really do content management and data science and metadata control inside of your organization, inside of your portal. A lot of more administrative type tasks. I'll show you that in a minute. And last but not least is the geoanalytics server. The geoanalytics server, much like image server is used for raster data, massive amounts of raster, the geoanalytics server component or role is designed for massive amounts of vector or tabular data. So big data processing, that requires a lot of ingest and a lot of throughput, whereas image server involves a lot of output. They have different capabilities. And so by having these different roles, what you're doing is you're sort of setting yourself up with server by knowing that you've got a good environment for doing real time or for doing imagery or for doing geoanalytics. Let's just kind of call out these components just briefly. I think one of the probably the most popular role that Shelby and I work with in local government is the GeoEvent server. This is real-time data ingestion. Real-time is a big deal, obviously, but the thing about GeoEvent server is it really works with three kinds of things, and we always think about the middle one, but it works with stationary things that change, like sensors, like temperature gauges, or water gauges, for example, or like an air quality monitoring station. These things have a static location and they have attributes that change on them over time. We could set GeoEvent server up to tell us when the air quality gets to be at a certain threshold, or when the water gauge shows a certain threshold. We can tell GeoEvent server to send a notification to somebody, or to do something else. So we've got stationary sensors. We've also got things that move, like AVL systems. I mean, this is the most common situation of using GeoEvent server that we're dealing with right now, and that's really mostly AVL, like vehicles, automatic vehicle locators for snow plows, police cars, construction vehicles, what have you. Very common. And on the right, the third example, the things that just kind of happen. You don't know when they're going to happen or where they're going to happen, but they might just happen from another source. So like lightning strikes is one common one. Car accidents or traffic conditions that are changing or tweets that are happening that are geocoded. And I love this. This is old. This video is probably 5 years old, but I do just love this video because this is a real world scenario. We're actually looking at an orange, sort of an orange grove turned into, being turned into a residential development. But what we're looking at is we're looking at construction vehicles moving around in real time through these different zones. And we've all heard of the term geofencing. And what you see is when one of these construction vehicles, like this one on the top left, this guy right here, when he moved out of his zone into another zone, we got an informational message. And it showed right here on the map. We could get an email, we could get a text message, what have you. It's telling us this individual is moving outside of their geofenced area. Shelby and I have talked to folks a lot about geofences, and one of the things that's really exciting, this example right here is really easy to understand, but one that I think we're starting to hear about more and more is with law enforcement, where certain law enforcement organizations want to know, like for example, they'll have a GeoEvent server set up and they want to know when they're going into a different territory, or they're going to within a certain distance of where someone needs to be served a warrant, or there's been a lot of criminal activity, or they need to do drive-bys in a certain part of town. They'll use GeoEvent server to sort of enable that and facilitate that movement. It's really interesting. Now back to so that's kind of the image server, sorry, the GeoEvent server. It works with real time. I'll kind of show you some more examples in a minute of that. I'll give you a little demo of that. But in the meantime, let's talk about kind of some of the others. The image server is a really, really powerful tool or server role that allows you to serve mosaic data sets of like all of your imagery. And we're using image server on the back end a lot in ArcGIS, and what you see is ArcGIS Online. I'll show you some examples shortly. But along with the image server, when you have the image server enabled, you'll have inside of ArcGIS Pro, for example, you'll have a drop down of a bunch of portal-based raster analysis tools. So you still have all the raster analysis tools that work on your desktop. But if you use these tools, you're taking advantage of the compute power in your enterprise server environment. So you're taking advantage of all the RAM and all the cores that you got. And inside of the enterprise web map, you get additional tools as well. So in addition to the regular 27 or so tools you have inside the web map, you now get a series of imagery tools. And you can also access those tools through the notebook, the ArcGIS notebook, which I'll show you here in a minute as well. Now, GeoAnalytics Server is probably some of our technology that is the most compelling for a lot of folks who are new to data science or new to GIS, because it allows you to work with really massive amounts of data in a parallel kind of computing environment, so that you can really, really churn out analysis results very, very quickly and very efficiently. And you're doing it on the server, so you're still able to use your client machine. And when we're talking about millions and billions of points, like crimes or graffiti locations or weather events or things that are happening all over the place. The idea behind GeoAnalytics Server is it uses all that back-end processing to enable some tools that help you detect relationships and predict the future, basically, of large amounts of data over space and time. So this lower map, this map of Manhattan we're looking at, I think, is showing the incidence of graffiti over time, different types of graffiti in different areas, for example. So if you're looking at really large amounts of data, really large amounts of throughput, then GeoAnalytics is the tool. And the last I wanted to highlight here before we get to a little demo is Notebook Server. And this came out new. This is new last year. I think it was sort of deployed or debuted at the users conference. This is a separate server role that allows you to do a lot of automation of data management, in some cases analysis, but really commonly, I think what Shelby and I see most right now is people are looking to use Notebook Server to do some basic administration of their portal, like the metadata or the meta of their portal as opposed to actual data. But this is a really powerful tool that allows you to work with the Python API, the REST API, the ArcGIS API for Python, and allows you to do and create basically documents called notebooks that you can outline and show kind of your process and document the process and the work that that you're doing. Let's just kind of switch over to a browser here, and I'll show you kind of some of these things in action. One of the things, let's start with the image server. And this is an application that's been around for a few years, and it's not very sexy, but it has some incredible work happening on the back end. This is Esri's Landsat Explorer. So we're looking at all of Landsat data collected through multiple satellites through Landsat 7 and ETM Plus over 40 years in one giant map. So let's zoom out a little bit here. I was looking in kind of like a Berthoud area at that point, but we're looking at basically all of the Landsat scenes covering all of the globe, all these thousands and thousands of scenes. I was messing around with this a little bit, and I've been doing some sort of time comparisons, but this can only happen with an image server. So what we're looking at, let's just pick this one little spot right here. And so the thing about Landsat data is it has, depending on the vintage, it's going to have probably about 7 or 8 bands. And software can render 3 bands at a time. Our software renders 3 bands at a time. And typically we're rendering the first, second, and third bands of an image, to get like the RGB, right? So the natural color, or the red, green, blue, or the RGB can be seen here. We're looking at an image. I think this particular one is from July 2nd, 2020. So it's just a few weeks ago, or a month ago. We can look at that image in natural color, or we can look at it in color infrared. So what we're doing is we're actually going through, the image server is going through and looking at those 7 bands and reshuffling them. So we were looking at a 3-2-1 band combination. Now we're looking at a 4-1-2 band combination with that infrared thing. We can also look at a band combination that highlights geologic features. We could look at a band combination that shows the vegetation index, the NDVI as it's called, or the burn index, or whatever combination of bands you want to use. You can even create your own custom index. Combination of bands pull out different sorts of things from the landscape. There's a lot of data that's captured from satellite sensors that we just can't see. So using tools like this to re-render them in different ways, it can be really powerful. Let's just go back just to give you an idea of the scale of this thing. Let's just look at a natural color. Oh no, let's make it cool. Let's look at a geology, or a geology map. So this is using the server on the back end to basically just bring in all these tiles and render them differently. But just to give you an idea, the scale we're looking at the whole nation. I mean, sorry, the whole globe. So many thousands of scenes. I can render all these images using natural color at the click of a button. Using all these, go look at a bathymetric at the click of a button. So this is doing a lot of really sophisticated work and math on the back end to calculate and present us with this data. It's really cool. So image server is doing a couple things here. I want to highlight. It's scaling out, sharing just many terabytes of data. I'm not even sure how many. What could be how much data is behind the scenes here, but this is all being managed by image server. But we can also do really powerful things that I haven't even highlighted. We can, for example, calculate change detection between any 2 of these images. So we can go back and look at 1974 and 1984 and 2014 and look at Berthoud and see how the urban index has changed in that area, for example. So we can do change detection in here. We can do a lot of really powerful things with these tools, but this is all happening through image server. One of the other components that I mentioned was the real-time tools, and we use this tool called the GeoEvent Server Manager, or the GeoEvent Manager, to do that. This is the other server role. This is what the actual technology looks like. So here is what you do with GeoEvent is you basically set up a service, and that's going to have, or set up a sort of a process, and it's going to have connectors, like input connectors, output connectors, and it's going to do things. For example, we can add another input connector into this. If I just click the input button right here. We can add a variety of different connectors. Oops, sorry. I think my page froze because I had it sitting here for a while, but we can add a variety of different connectors from different sources, like pulling for a change in a CSV file, like for example, or looking for a change in some other aspect of our data. Let's see if we can grab another input. I just want to show you some of the options. Here we go. So some of our input connectors, we have a lot of input connectors, and these are basically connectors to another service, another type of a URL, like Waze, for example, or an ArcGIS Server service, what have you. So we can look, for example, at a feature service to see when there's an update, and then it can do something. We can look at files, looking for new CSV files or JSON or what have you. A lot of capabilities in here that we can add with the GeoEvent Manager. And then the end result is basically you get web maps that are bringing in data in real time, storing it probably in spatiotemporal data store or something like that. And this is how it's manifested in the user world frequently. This is real-time data using GeoEvent Server, running an ArcGIS Enterprise in the cloud right now. This is using Amazon Web Services. This is Enterprise running in the cloud. It's one thing we haven't really talked much about is where you can install it. We'll get to that kind of later on. But it's running in the cloud. It's pulling real-time information from real-time data from crowdsourced provider. In this case, it's Waze. So Waze, people are reporting accidents. They're reporting jams and slowdowns and weather hazards in real time. And this is all happening. This is all happening in Charlotte right now. So that's kind of how one way people typically use GeoEvent servers to show things that just sort of, not only vehicles moving around, but things that just sort of happen. Jams just happen, accidents just happen, and weather hazards just happen. And people are using the Waze application to provide that data, and we're just bringing it in and rendering it in real time here. GeoEvent, as I mentioned, is really powerful, and it's probably the most common additional server role that our users are working with right now. The last bit I wanted to show you as far as some of these extended capabilities go is with the notebook server, and this is relatively new, and Shelby and I don't have a ton of users. We're starting to get a lot of uptick in adoption of this, but we don't have a lot of folks using it in production. So definitely wanted to kind of call this out. Notebooks allow you to do a lot of really important capabilities, but we like to think about them kind of in a couple different. I like to think about them in a couple different kind of categories. Like there's notebooks that are built to administer your organization, like to make sure users have been logging in, or if users haven't logged in a year or a certain period of time, you can send them an email or something like that. You can use notebooks to do data science and analysis, or manage content. Like check on the status of content, or check for broken links on a content. And when you get Notebook Server going, it comes with a variety of samples, and these are some of these samples. I just want to show you a couple of them. One of them that's really popular is this, the manage inactive users. So this is the notebook environment. The thing I like about this is we're bringing in the ArcGIS API for Python, and we're actually able to document what we're doing and organize and really create a sort of a nice framework for doing our work. And we can come back and run individual components of this. We can go through here and just run little bits of our code to sort of set things up. And then what we're doing here is just documenting everything that we've gone through. This is a sample. So you can take this and modify this to say you want to find a user whose last login was 180 days prior, and maybe you want to notify that person that they're losing their content or what have you. So this is all the components of that particular script or that particular notebook in this environment. And I can share this with other folks. I can share this with other organizations. It's sort of an administrative process. Another one that's really cool is more like data science example. And this one comes in. From this is a scenario for the Boston Police Department, and we've got sort of all the different components of this particular document, setting up all the pointers to the libraries in Python, bringing in the police precincts feature layer. So we're grabbing the item off the portal, and then we're doing some analysis in here and mapping things. So notebooks, I know that was it wasn't even really a demo, but just sort of an orientation. Notebooks are very powerful, and I would encourage you to start digging into them, especially if you do a lot of data management or a lot of sort of tasks that could be automated. And that would be a really powerful capability to explore for sure. All right. So in addition, we just kind of highlighted some of those example or extended roles. But in addition to that, you do get, just so you know, you still do with our ArcGIS Enterprise, just like you do with ArcGIS Online, get access to those 27 standard tools. So when you're in the web map viewer, like this little animation shows, we have tools for summarizing data, finding locations, enriching, finding patterns and proximity, and all this stuff. If you enable those roles, then you have more tools in this particular setup, but you can do a lot right out of the box. Another thing you get with all ArcGIS, whether you're using ArcGIS Online or ArcGIS Enterprise, is access to the Living Atlas, and we're seeing a lot more uptake in this. There's a lot of resources that have been coming out recently with regards to healthcare and COVID, and racial equity. These are layers that people don't manage themselves, but that Esri's managing and providing through the Living Atlas from a variety of other sources. These are really powerful. I know you all have been exposed to the Living Atlas. Some of the base maps are coming from the Living Atlas, but there's lots of other data in there that from authoritative sources I'd encourage you to check out. And then once you set up your portal, and once you've got your enterprise set up, then kind of one of the other powerful capabilities that I think is really content management and access control. And this is what you get with that. You get the ability to create groups just like you do with ArcGIS Online, but you really get the ability to control at a very fine-grained level who has access to what. Typically, we see groups, Shelby and I see groups organized in organizations and local governments by land records or assessment. It could be like a department or Parks and Recreation or law enforcement or the sheriff's office. That could be a group. So often groups are defined by an organizational chart. And then one of the other components we added in the last year or two is the ability to have content categories. And I think this helps people explore and find the data in a way very, very, very quickly. So you could have content categories like we're seeing here, like boundaries, people, imagery, base maps, etc. And then one of the other things that's important is the content status. So if you have, this has been recently updated, I think in the last couple of versions of ArcGIS Enterprise, where you can mark your layers or your items as authoritative or as deprecated. So authoritative is obviously an authoritative source for the data, and much of the stuff you see in ArcGIS Online in the Living Atlas is data that's been marked as authoritative. You don't see stuff that's been marked as deprecated in there. So we've got a lot of content management tools. And then, excuse me, once you've got content, that's sort of the last step is building those web applications, figuring out how your users are going to interact with the data and the information. We have a whole spectrum from easy stuff on the left to more effort involved stuff on the right. So there's configurable applications that come with ArcGIS Enterprise. There's application templates that come with ArcGIS Enterprise. There are app builders, like the web app builder, the experience builder, and there are little widget components you can build for those app builders if you like. And then there's software development kits and APIs going all the way to more coding to less coding or to no coding. So there's a spectrum. And straight up, 10 years ago, everything was being done over here. Pretty much everything was being done with the API and software development kit level. But now as we've been building better technology, Esri's been building better front-end technology for ArcGIS Enterprise, these things have really taken over. I know many of you on the call have used the web app builder. Many of you have used story maps. Those are all examples of app templates and app builders. And just sort of a little heads up, the there are a couple of app builders that you might want to check out. We have a new dashboard out now. I think it's, I'm not sure, I think it's, I can't recall if it's still in beta or not, but we have a new dashboard builder that's really exciting. And then probably one of the really powerful, most powerful tools you'll hear a lot about in the builder world is the experience builder. The experience builder is a application that's used to create what we would call web experiences. It's much more flexible than what you're used to with like the web app builder. The web app builder works with, you know, a single page experience. You're working in a map with some stuff on the side, you know, some pop-ups and all that, and it's really cool. But the experience builder allows you to create stuff like that, but it also allows you to create stuff more like story maps or you know, that kind of have a scrolling experience. And they also allows you to do things like integrate survey 1, 2, 3 inside of a dashboard. So you can actually be editing data in a dashboard. Really, really cool, really flexible, I think you'll see a lot of talk from Esri in the next year or so about the experience builder. So now once we've kind of built our applications, we look at sort of the level of responsibilities we have and how to work with those responsibilities for providing this data. This is the CIA triad, which is kind of a common term in cybersecurity: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. We want to be able to protect sensitive information from improper access. So a lot of folks like want HIPAA data, and they need to have that available confidently. So they're using ArcGIS Enterprise to manage HIPAA-related data, or some crime data. You know, often police departments have their own sort of internal or separate enterprise where they've kept everything kind of locked up in their own environment. The confidentiality is really about protecting the data and controlling who has access to it. Integrity is just maintaining the authority and maintaining the editing integrity, or the sort of the update integrity of your data. And then availability is huge. Keeping your data, making sure your data and your service is available all the time, and ArcGIS Enterprise is built for this. ArcGIS Enterprise has components where you can have high availability set up. So we can really control a lot of that through ArcGIS Enterprise. Let me take a swig here real quick. Some cold coffee. And the last sort of the next section, and we'll get into a lot of demonstrations here shortly, just keep it exciting, is to talk about how it's flexible. We'll talk about kind of the virtual architecture, the versatile architecture options you have, the deployment scenarios, and how it's scalable, and how we can integrate it with a setup, your own internal setup. But a couple things, I know a lot of users that I support talk with other users. You know, a lot of GIS administrators talk with each other about their organizations and how they have their enterprise set up and what kind of technology they're using. And I think there's a lot of sort of comparison going on. But the thing that's important is there's not really, there's very few deployments that are identical. Some organizations, some counties I work with are really focused on law enforcement and the sheriff's office, and they've got a lot of GIS focused in that department. Or a lot of counties also have a lot of GIS capabilities built around the assessor department and the land records department. And those are really data management heavy applications or uses of the technology. Others are using enterprise in more of a front-end environment where they're just accessing data through an insights workbook or something along those lines. But there's really a lot of flexibility in how you deploy enterprise, and let's kind of talk about that. And really it comes down to asking questions at the onset. Questions like, and this is what we all skip. I mean, this is sort of the planning. I shouldn't say that we all skip. This is the part that many of us skip in our excitement to deploy the tech, is thinking about kind of taking a step back. Who's going to need access to it? What kind of work are they going to be doing? And how much work are they going to be doing? And once we have all these questions, and there's more, those are just a few of them. We've got some worksheets I can show you later on and help you sort of understand this a little better and blow this out a little bit more. But once we have these questions, we can sort of make some sort of succinct distinctions or decisions, like we need this amount of machine resources. We need a failover environment. We need this many people to have this level of access. We need to have this level of control, this level of security to embed it with our existing IT framework. So these are the kind of the decisions that we need to make based on the questions we ask. It's not always a good idea just to go in and install the software and then start thinking about this. It's good to do it beforehand, take a more pragmatic approach. And let's go through so once we have sort of understood answered those questions, we have a lot of flexibility. So Shelby and I are going to take a little time on this and talk about sort of our different options. So the options we have on the left are infrastructure type, size, the roles, the availability, and the deployment tools. So let's go through each one of these first. First, thinking about the infrastructure, and there's a lot of flexibility with deploying ArcGIS Enterprise. There's obviously been a cloud first push in many IT organizations or many organizations recently and in the last couple of years. So we have a lot of folks who are deploying stuff in a private cloud, like through Amazon Web Services or Azure, for example. That is very common, more and more common now, as people are having less needs for their own server infrastructure because the cloud is solid. But there are a lot of situations, and in fact, probably most of our users are using some level. In fact, I'd say all of our users who are using Enterprise are using some level of on-premise setup. And a lot of times this comes from sort of the data management paradigm where they've got SDE databases or enterprise databases that they've already got on servers. So hey, let's just add some more servers and some more capacity to get Enterprise going. But the thing I want to leave you with on the infrastructure type is that a lot of users, all of our users will use a mix. So some folks are using ArcGIS Enterprise on-premise, or the data sources maybe are on-premise, or maybe the application servers are in the cloud. Maybe they're using a combination of physical and virtual machines. It's very flexible.
And then on the infrastructure side, size piece, you know, you'll want to ask questions before deploying around how many machines do you want to use? How many machines do you need, maybe to separate out environments for different workflows or to support different systems? And how many can you manage, of course? And then in terms of the size of each machine. So thinking about size in terms of processing power or CPU, also thinking about size in terms of memory or RAM. So I think, you know, effectively with this one, it's how busy will your ArcGIS Enterprise be, right? How many people will be using it? How much data will you manage in the system?
And a lot of times, sometimes that's dictated by licensing people have, isn't it, Shelby? Like, you know, they'll maybe have a 4-core license. So sometimes they're limited to just having, you know, a 4-core license of ArcGIS Enterprise. But some of our users might also have like an enterprise license where they can have basically unlimited access to the server.
Yep. Enterprise agreement. Yep. Good point, Dave.
Yeah, thanks.
Yep.
And one of the other components is what server roles are you going to need? And you're obviously going to need an ArcGIS server role. I mean, that's part of the base deployment. So you're always starting off with the server role, but do you need add-on stuff? Do you need the GeoAnalytics or the GeoEvent or the image server or any of these other servers that add on, the server roles that add on capabilities? And there's also add-on tools like ArcGIS Monitor is something that's been out for, I don't know, a couple of years. It was actually a professional services tool that we used. When we did professional services engagements, a lot of times we would leave them with this tool to monitor their setup. And now we've actually productized it and made it so that you can use ArcGIS Monitor to monitor all the instances and all the hardware and and software in your implementation. Or maybe you want to add something else like Workflow Manager or some other industry solution that requires something. For example, some of those tools, like for example, a lot of the parcel editing and utility network editing stuff that's happening are going to require different capabilities. They're going to require enterprise. They're going to require services.
And then moving on to high availability. This is an option that will allow failovers in ArcGIS Enterprise. So the questions on this one are around, what is your organization's plan for dealing with machine failure? Is there an SLA or a service level agreement that is expected by or promised to customers or users? And then sort of back to that point about licensing, do you have, and resourcing, do you have the funds and resources to be able to stand up those standby machines and build in those strategies?
As far as deploying the tech, this has come a long way. This has come such a long way since I started working with our technology. You can still install ArcGIS Enterprise by hand using the installers, and that's honestly the way I still do it, just because I feel like I understand things better. It gives you a lot of flexibility, but there are easier ways of doing it, and there are smarter ways of doing it depending on your scenario. There's a tool that got a lot of hype called the ArcGIS Enterprise Builder, which is a really simple tool to use in a development environment or on a single machine environment. It lays down all the technology in a wizard. It's very simple to use, but it only works when you're dealing with one machine. If you're using web technology, we have a number of builders that we call them cloud builders or machine images. So Amazon Web Services, AWS, we have a lot of folks who've been running ArcGIS Enterprise and AWS. We do it. We have our own private cloud inside of Amazon Web Services that we use to spin up ArcGIS machines, ArcGIS Enterprise machines. In fact, the one that Shelby's going to show in a minute is all running in Amazon Web Services through our internal private cloud. There's also Azure. Azure as a cloud builder. So the Amazon Web Services, the thing I wanted to point out, sorry, I kind of got ahead of myself, was that you don't even need to install the software. You can just activate an environment. You can activate an ArcGIS Enterprise environment configured in a certain way right from Amazon Web Services. Or you can use a cloud builder tool like in Microsoft Azure to build that environment. There's also some more script-based tools. Chef is becoming more and more common way of deploying ArcGIS Enterprise. It's a script-based tool, so if you're deploying it over and over again in an environment, then that may be something certainly worth utilizing. But the thing about ArcGIS Enterprise, and this is really, I think, an important concept, is there's not, a lot of times people position, and we do it too, position ArcGIS Online kind of against ArcGIS Enterprise, but they really work together. A lot of our users fall into these kind of one of two camps. And I had the good fortune of being able to work with a lot of users who've been doing GIS for 20 years or so, and they use this tool called Lightning Layers that eventually got called SDE, and then that eventually got called ArcSDE, and then they called IMS, the Internet Map Server. They've been working with all this on-premise enterprise technology, tuning it, configuring it, installing and upgrading it for years. And they're really comfortable with this on-premise environment over here on the right, this scenario. And then we have a lot of users who really wanted to get into web content and sharing web content, but they didn't have a lot of IT infrastructure maybe on the back end. So they started with ArcGIS Online. And that's cool too. This right here is so common. So ArcGIS Online is basically like ArcGIS Enterprise running in Esri's environment. We manage it, we control it, we upgrade it multiple times a year. ArcGIS Enterprise, you got to manage, you got to control, and you got to upgrade it yourself. But what we see is sort of this combination, this sort of confluence of these two technologies, where a lot of folks are using ArcGIS Enterprise on the back end, maybe for their data, and they're sharing that data out to ArcGIS Online and using this as sort of their data tier for internal stuff. And this is their application tier for external stuff. We see that used very commonly. And then in some cases, you want to have them tied together through something called a collaboration, which Shelby will show in a little while, which is really a strong connection between an enterprise and an online organization. Organization, by the way, is the term that we use to call an ArcGIS online portal. So I just realized I've been using that word without really explaining what it means. That's just organization is an online portal. All right, moving kind of through, almost finished with this little section on flexibility is really to keep in mind that once you've laid down the framework, it's not a static thing. It's going to change. There's going to be more. There's going to be varying levels of demand on your tech, on your platform. So being able to control it and scale it through time is really important. One of the things that I've seen that has really removed or eliminated sort of the barrier to entry for users of ArcGIS Enterprise is by working with your existing organization's authentication system. And this might not be familiar to some of you, and that's okay. But on the left-hand side is kind of like what we think of as ArcGIS Online, the old school kind of ArcGIS Online where you would sign in, you create a username. I create a username called Dave V, and that's stored inside the identity store in ArcGIS Online or ArcGIS Enterprise. So there's some flexibility there. There's some pros and cons, but basically you're creating a new account. And honestly, this has prevented a lot of folks from utilizing ArcGIS Enterprise, WebGIS a lot because they got to create a new account. They got to remember their password. It's separate from their user's authentication, for their organization's authentication system. What we see when we see people using like an enterprise identity store like Microsoft Active Directory, for example, on the right, is that when you can integrate the authentication system, you're having a single sign-on environment. So when you click on a web link, it opens up and signs you in automatically based on your domain login. So you don't have to remember any passwords, and when you update your domain login, when you log into your machine, it updates it. It carries over into that platform. And then you can use something like we use at Esri. We use a SAML-based identity provider called Okta. So Okta allows us, when I'm going to, it's a web page that I sign into, and I can access a variety of different web content, like our timesheet system or Salesforce or our event planning stuff, or in this case, I have a whole bunch of different ArcGIS Enterprise and ArcGIS Online organizations I can click on and get signed right into. Really, really powerful. A lot of flexibility. So SAML is really great for that. Okay, and last kind of thing before I turn it over to Shelby for some of the really cool collaboration stuff is there's a variety of really, really useful white papers. And let me actually just kind of pop out of this for a second, bring them over. There are, let's see, let me get this over here. There are a couple of really, really good white papers. They're available through our support system, but I just generally would do a Google search on Esri white paper, and then you always get these three. The one that I would definitely want to highlight for you all is Architecting the Platform, the Best Practices. This is a document that's updated at least quarterly. You can see it was updated in March. And this talks about all of the components of an ArcGIS platform, the portal, the enterprise components, the apps, the data sources, and it really breaks down some best practices. And this is kind of organized where things are on their own separate page, like automation is a page, capability delivery is a page, distributed GIS is a page, environmental isolation is a page. So if you want a sort of succinct 20 or 30 page document on best practices for all things on enterprise, this is your resource. I share this with people probably on a weekly basis. A really educational tool that I've found has been the data in ArcGIS. I mean, this is where, when I'm talking to existing users about managing data with ArcGIS Enterprise, there's definitely some hangups and some confusion about managed and unmanaged data and what the implications are. But here's something that you should know about. This is crazy to think about. Typical ArcGIS Enterprise setup with user-managed data, that is ArcSDE geodatabases, enterprise geodatabases, whatever you want to call them. You've got databases, and you've got services, feature services, map services, whatever. Typical 4-core license can serve, I mean, there's a lot of variability, but typically serve 100 or 1 to 300 services, say, before you're kind of running out of RAM and running out of capacity. And there's a lot of variables that affect that, but let's just say 1 to 300 services. If you're using the ArcGIS data store that Shelby talked about earlier on, the data store is designed for this very purpose. The enterprise database is really designed for transaction management, for editing and version management and replication and comparing changes to layers over time and all that kind of stuff. But the user that's what the user managed data is. ArcGIS managed data is the data store. And the data store still allows you to edit stuff. You just can't, like as Shelby mentioned, you just don't access it through like a feature class like you do in ArcPro. But here's the thing. If you're using ArcGIS managed data sources in your enterprise, you can support thousands of services with the exact same license as an exact same hardware as you can with user managed. So major, I didn't really explain that very well, but significantly more scalable by factors of tens at least on how many more services you can provide with the same hardware. So when I meet with users who don't have an enterprise agreement with Esri and they have just like one license of ArcGIS Enterprise and they're like, man, there's suddenly the utilities department is on here and suddenly they're doing a lot of work and I don't know, I'm running out of license. I can't buy any more software. I don't know what to do. Then we usually talk about leveraging some ArcGIS online resources. And then we usually talk about leveraging some ArcGIS managed data sources so they can really scale things out a lot more. So what I'm getting at in this long-winded thing is there's a lot of flexibility in how you, and the scalability you can have in your system with how you manage the data. The last white paper I want to talk about is this one, Content Management Techniques for Your GIS Portal. This is really cool document on just how to manage and control the quality and the access of your data. So it's all about sort of the different users, different types of levels of access and kind of what you can do with them. So 3 very good documents. They're updated regularly. I've downloaded them in my machine here, but they're updated regularly. And you can just search on Esri white paper and you'll find these. These will be the first 3 that come up. There's something else I felt like I wanted to say, but it'll probably come up later. I'll probably think of it and interrupt you, Shelby. Sorry. Let's move back over to Shelby. She's gonna get into some of the really cool kind of front-end capabilities of how we can use ArcGIS Enterprise to be collaborative.
Awesome, thanks, Dave. My slideshow going. Just got a handful of slides here and then I'll move over into some demo. So the fourth characteristic of ArcGIS Enterprise is that it is very collaborative. So
I'm not seeing your screen yet, Shelby.
Oh.
I know you got a slide you want to show.
Huh. Looks like I'm sharing from my end. Let me try again.
There we go. Something's happening. There we go. We're on.
All right, cool. And now can you see this?
Yes,
okay,
looks good.
All right, so ArcGIS Enterprise provides a collaborative environment for your content so that you're really able to share your content internally, maybe across departments, with partnering entities, GIS users, non-GIS users anymore, you name it. So Enterprise provides an intuitive and secure sharing model of GIS content. So, you know, each one of these item types that lives in your ArcGIS Enterprise portal is shareable in the same way. So Esri, you know, development has worked hard to make it a familiar model that is consistent across the item types, so that the security and sharing settings look to be almost identical between the different item types. So as I'm sure many of you are aware, the security and sharing of these items are handled at the item level, so that you would essentially, select the item and share it appropriately. In terms of the actual sharing options, starting from the left, you can not share the item. And in that case, it's only you and the administrators in the organization, or in the portal rather, that would have access to that item. The second option is to manage and share items via group. So, locking down access to only members of a particular group, which is a very effective way of sharing content. The next option is to share with the whole organization, which in some cases might just kind of be easier, right? To do a broad brush, just share it with everyone who has a named user account. Maybe that will kind of streamline the administration. If people are coming and going out of the organization, they'll have access to particular content as opposed to using groups. And then of course, the last option is to share with everyone. So if your enterprise portal is enabled for public access, you can share content out to the open internet. For information sharing, maybe with citizens of your jurisdiction, or even to solicit feedback from citizens, maybe through a survey, for example. So on to distributed collaboration. Collaboration is a really exciting capability that allows for basically a secure pipeline for sharing data between multiple portals. And so it can be, you can establish that that pipeline between two portals, or between ArcGIS Enterprise and ArcGIS Online. The access control for a collaboration is all based on the familiar group sharing model, which makes it, very much integrated into the system. It's that familiar group model. Collaboration keeps content up to date, right, between two portals. So let's think about a couple of use cases. It might be sharing between a state and local entity, or maybe between two neighboring entities that that need to share resources. For example, it can be between two departments within a jurisdiction. Maybe the police and fire department need to share address points, right? And everyone needs to be using the same authoritative data set, so they can keep it up to date and keep that reliable data on hand by using distributed collaboration. You can share content either by reference or by copy with distributed collaboration, which is cool. So reference, of course, means you're basically pointing back to a service. Maybe the fire department owns that service and the police department is referencing it. So every time they call it up, it's reaching back to the fire department service. Or you can literally copy that content between portals, in which case you would establish a sync frequency and you have control over that sync frequency. In terms of what items you can share using collaboration, they're all listed here. This list is growing, so keep in touch with what's happening with collaboration if you think it can benefit your organization. But there on the left-hand side, a lot of sort of the standard content types that you'll work with in the portal. And then what's so cool too is you can share apps. Web app builder apps, or apps from other templates, insights workbooks, for example, and then hosted feature layer views, which I am going to show here in a minute. So an example scenario, one thing I haven't mentioned is that when you're collaborating between online and enterprise, online always has to be the host, okay? That doesn't mean that they're the only ones sending those, so they can also receive data as the host. And in this particular scenario, which is the most frequently used pattern, is that the source data, the authoritative data, is living in the enterprise. So, you know, being managed, maybe edited in the enterprise, the data itself can either live in that ArcGIS data store or in your own user managed data source. And then it's collaborating up to ArcGIS Online. So in this case, you know, maybe it's you're putting out a public facing app and want to keep it updated, of course. And so this is a great way to do that. And then almost in the reverse, with ArcGIS Online still being the host, you can push data from online back to ArcGIS Enterprise. And this would make sense for field data collection. So, you know, you want to enable your field crews with data and capabilities for their workflows. And, you know, a lot of times that's more straightforward to do using ArcGIS Online. And then you can push that data back down into enterprise on a regular basis and keep systems running and up to date on the enterprise side. And then enterprise sites. So we've talked about great ways to share data. This is an awesome way to enable folks to better consume data, and absolutely aligns with, you know, the fact that Esri has really expanded into capabilities around sharing data. So enterprise sites are web pages that are configured within ArcGIS Enterprise that are designed to be easily navigable for internal folks. So maybe that's for non-GIS users, right? You know, you don't want your law enforcement staff to have to, you know, sort of poke around in the portal and figure out what is the right data layer, or where is that app that I really needed, or it's a way to bring content together around a theme and make it very easy to consume by the end user. It's kind of a centralized location for organizing content. Okay, so with that, I am going to kind of poke around and show you a few different things with collaboration and enterprise sites. Dave, can you still see my screen, my split screen now between two portals? Okay,
I can
great.
see the both of them, yep.
Okay, cool. All right, so on the left-hand side, I have an ArcGIS Online organization. And I am logged in as an administrator in this org. On the right-hand side, I have an ArcGIS Enterprise portal. And I am also logged in as an administrator on that side. And I have navigated to the organization tab on in each of these two portals. And I want to point out that there's a collaborations section on each side under that organization tab. So I've already built a collaboration between these two portals, and I'll just kind of dig in and explain how that process went. The collaboration is called DougCo Collaboration, Douglas County. And within that collaboration, I have a workspace. So you always have to have a designated workspace that's part of a collaboration. That workspace is pointing to a group. So I had mentioned this is group-based. So everything that is shared to the DougCo Wildfire group is going to be part of this collaboration that exists with my ArcGIS Enterprise. Okay, so I do have the guest set up there under my collaboration. And what I did when I initiated this collaboration was I clicked invite guest. And what that does is it creates a file And that file is then sent to the admin of the enterprise, right? And that could be sent through email or something similar. And then on the ArcGIS Enterprise side, I come in and I accept the invitation. And I just point to that file, that is that invitation file. Once I do that, Enterprise then generates another file that is the response to the invitation. It's basically the acceptance. As the Enterprise admin, I send that back to the ArcGIS Online admin. They then plug in that response into the collaboration on that side, and the collaboration is then established. On the Enterprise side, there is also, we're pointing to the same workspace that is associated with a group within the Enterprise portal. Okay, so that collaboration exists between the two. Next thing we're going to do is look at some data. So this is Douglas County, and I've got a couple data sets here. One is crime points from 2019, and I pulled this from their open data site. And the other, in the blue boundaries, are police beats for the county. And then I have the same data here in my enterprise. In fact, the data is hosted in the enterprise and is being referenced by the ArcGIS Online org. And that's how this collaboration has been set up. So let's start by just making a quick edit and seeing how that passes through the collaboration. So on my police beats, maybe I want to edit the naming convention of the beats themselves. And my police beats layer is editable. Let's go ahead, and you can see on the enterprise site, my beat is called 01. Okay. And on the ArcGIS Online side, it's also called 01 because it's the same data. Okay, so now I'm going to edit. I clicked edit, and let's change this beat name to beat 1. And so I'm going to close that and save that map. And then when we come over here, we can see that that name has already been updated. I mean, that's reflected in the referenced layer, right? So it makes sense, and it's just passing through that collaboration. Okay. Next thing I want to point out, I'm going to open up the content of my enterprise. And I want to point out that that crimes data exists as a feature layer, or a hosted feature layer. Here, I'm going to open this up a little. In the content of my enterprise portal, okay? So that's the crime 2019 feature layer. And what I've done is I've created a view of that feature layer. And a layer view, you can see here in the item type that it's called out that this is a view. And like I mentioned earlier in the presentation, a view references the same data. So so the public view is referencing the crime 2019, but allows for different sharing, different settings. You can filter views, etc. So let me click into this view so we can explore that quickly. Okay, once again, we can see it's a view. We can see that the layer it's pointing to. I want to point out under settings of that view that editing is not enabled. So on our public view, we don't want people to get in and edit. Also want to point out that the view is shared here on the bottom right with that group, with the collaboration group. Uh-oh. The view, oh geez, hold on a second. I'm back. So back to our feature layer view. That is the one that's shared with my collaboration group, not the original Crime 2019. Okay, so let's, and you know, on the online side, you believe me, it's only the view that's shared on that group. I'm not going to show you that. Okay, so now I can make a change to the crime in my Crime 2019 layer. And let's say we need to make an edit to one of these points, where in fact this crime didn't happen along this boundary. It actually happened, oh, I need to click edit here in my enterprise portal. I'm going to move this crime sort of up this boundary a little bit and leave that one right there. And I'm going to click save on this map. On this side, we're looking at that public view through the collaboration, and it should pop in there, and there it is. So what I've demonstrated here is that I can make edits on the enterprise side, and in near real time, it's reflected on the online side. So you can imagine the public accessing an app on the online side and, you know, having access to truly the latest and greatest authoritative data. Okay, from there, I'm going to close my ArcGIS Online org and let's take a look at enterprise sites. I'm going to go back to my content. Enterprise sites is accessed through the app launcher. And if you've used ArcGIS Hub, you'll be very familiar with what we're about to see. Enterprise sites and Hub are built on the same code base. And so I do have a enterprise site started, and it's kind of building on the Douglas County data a little bit. And you can create a new site under this new button. And when you do, it looks a lot like what we're about to see with the Douglas County Sheriff's Office example. All I've done to this site is changed the logo, added a picture under this title bar, and that's it. That's all I've done so far. The rest of what you see is part of sort of the initiation template. When you first initiate an enterprise site, you get this template. So you're able to share data through enterprise sites just like you can through Hub. And then the rest of this template is really just placeholders. And you know, it's a way to get started. You can plug in your own text. You can plug in your own apps and maps. You can embed videos and photos, and you can really go to town with customizing your enterprise site. On the left-hand side, I can see the controls for editing my site. And so I'll just take you through a demo on kind of building out some tools as part of this particular site. Under settings, I can do things like change the site URL. So that's kind of cool because this is adopting the title of the site, but you can really tailor it to your needs. On the header, I have, you know, control of the header. This is a what you see is what you get editing experience. You know, I've added my logo in. I can turn on social icons. You notice they're popping in on the right-hand side of my site, and I can plug in the URLs associated with each of those social media platforms. I'm going to come back to the header in a few minutes here. Under theme, this is really look and feel, and color, default colors and things. And then under the layout, this is where it really gets to be fun and powerful. So these are all the different element types or card types that I can drag over onto my site. So let's get started. Let's bring over, to start, let's just do some kind of high-level summary statistics of what's happening with crime in the county. And when I drag over a card type, I need to dock it just by kind of dragging it over that white rectangle. And that card docks. And then I'm presented with the configuration of that card on the left-hand side. I can also toggle in and out of the configuration using this gear that when I hover over the card, it presents that gear. Okay, so let's have a data-driven statistic. This is called the indicator card. And let's plug on that crime 2019. You know, nobody's getting in here and editing this number. This is just driven by the underlying data set. And let's just take a count of, I can click on really any attribute here to derive a count of 2019 crimes. I can add filters into that statistic, and then I can say, you know, 2019 crimes. I can turn the source link on and off, which is really nice. So I can see the layer name of where this statistic's coming from. I can add some comments, you know, this data set is whatever. Okay, let's go back to our layout, and I'm now going to bring over a chart, and I want to dock the chart right next to my statistic. And similarly, I'm presented with the configuration. Let's point to that same data set. And in this case, I want to make a pie chart. And that's exactly what I wanted to do. I wanted to look at 2019 crimes by jurisdiction as a pie chart. And so I have my data configured under options. I can give it a title, and I have some more configuration options as well. Okay, so back to my layout panel. The sites are organized into rows. So you'll see that I've got the cards. When I hover over a card, I have these blue buttons on the top right of my card. When I hover over the row, so these are controlling the row. And I'm gonna move this one down into the next row. And so that this row just kind of flattened. And I'm gonna pull a new row in just to kind of show you that this is how you can organize content. I'm gonna give this one a different color just to kind of call it out a little bit. And then in that row, I'm gonna embed an application. And so I can select my application. I've got this suicide dashboard ready to go. This dashboard actually lives in ArcGIS Online, in Douglas County's ArcGIS Online, and I registered it in this enterprise portal so that I was able to access it from that interface and bring it in. Okay, so there's my live dashboard. It's looking a little squished, so let's increase the height of that application, and we're looking good. I can interact with the app, and that's good so far. Another way that I can bring in apps is with a gallery. So I'm going to drag a gallery into that same row that I created. And it automatically picked up a survey, probably because I tested this before this call. But with a gallery, I can have up to 4 cards showing across, and I can pull in items either by using tags or by pointing to a group. So you have some options on how you select the items. And then the last option is to do it manually. So I can select the content manually, and I can, let's see, I've got content. I was going to bring in my crime data dashboard. So I'll select that. And then I'm also going to bring in under feedback, I can access any Survey 123 forms that are part of my enterprise portal. So I'm going to go ahead and add that in too. And the gallery card organizes these thumbnails in a nice clean way. I see we're right up against 11 o'clock. If you guys are okay, I'm going to just spend a couple more minutes on this. The crime data dashboard doesn't have a thumbnail and description associated with it, and that's why this looks like kind of more of a plain thumbnail a little bit. It's the item details thumbnail and description that passes through into this spot. Okay, so the last thing I'm going to add onto this main page are a couple social media feeds, or I'll just add one and you guys will get the idea. So I can type in here oh shoot, this gets a little, here, let me do something. Let me just do something. Hold on one sec. Bear with me. I noticed sometimes you need to copy paste a Twitter handle in rather than type it in. I'm not sure why. Okay, so for DC Sheriff, I'm going to paste that in. And there is the Twitter feed for that particular DC Sheriff, for Douglas County Sheriff. I can put another social media feed and kind of dock it next to it and populate that one with a different Twitter feed. I can also change the real estate, the you know, how much space each component occupies. Okay, next there is some data categories that come with this initial template, and I can plug data into those categories, but I'm going to do that in a different place. What I'm going to do now is create a new page on my enterprise site. Actually, first let me save my changes. Very important step. Okay, now I'm going to add a new page to my enterprise site, and this is where you can really get creative with sharing. So I can say Douglas County Sheriff's Office internal, or something that means only a subgroup of people. And I'm creating a new page now called DCSO internal. This is the template for a new page. And what I want to show now is plugging some data, adding some data through the category, if I can find that category card, onto this page. This is going to be my crime data. And what I need to do in order to plug my crime data into that category is first add the crime data to my content management of this enterprise site. So I'll show you what I mean by that. Okay, so now I'm going to go to the content library. So every enterprise site has a content library associated with it. And this is where you can expose data sets and other content. So from my organization, or from my content rather, I'm going to add my crime data to this site, to the content management of this site. Now I'm going to go back to my site home and navigate back to that page and configure this category. Now, I have a tag on that crime data called crime. Oop. Oh, geez. There we go. Before we explore that crime data, I just want to show you the sharing associated with this page. So I can lock this page down to only specific groups of people within the sheriff's office. So maybe it's a subset, only a handful of folks that really should have access to that data set. I can lock it down to only them. And when I go back to my site home, to my header, I'm going to add that page to my header. So I'm adding a link to my header menu from existing content, and it's from my pages that are my content. And there's that page I just created. So that now shows up on my header. But I want to make the point again, it will only show up if you're part of the group that it's been shared to. So you can really lock down control of access of things even within an enterprise site. Okay, so let's save our work and view, and I'll show you the crime data through from this page. So here's our main page. There's my dashboard coming through. There's my gallery and my social media feeds. Navigate to my private page, click into crime data. And there's my one data set that had the crime tag associated with it. And the experience of, it's similar to the ArcGIS Hub Open Data experience, where as the end user, I can actually explore the data spatially. I can click into points. Here, let me zoom in to hopefully have the data draw a little bit faster. So I can really explore the data. I can click onto features and learn about its attributes. I can see a data table. I can filter the data. And like that. And that, I believe, is all I had to show on the demo side. And I did have a couple tabs to show, sort of moving into resources around ArcGIS Enterprise. I wanted to mention the documentation is really the best place to go to get started on getting your questions answered. There's always a what's new section, which is really great to keep up with. How to upgrade your system. There are installation guides, a quick button to system requirements. And then I also wanted to highlight this functionality matrix. I'm not going to open it up, but it's a really nice resource for understanding the different server roles and the capabilities that they bring, the user roles and what they have access to in enterprise, things like supported environments and data types. Also wanted to point out the ArcGIS blog. This is probably my favorite resource, to keep up with what's happening across ArcGIS. It's pretty awesome. And under topics, now you can filter by ArcGIS Enterprise. So another great resource for understanding what's new and what's coming, and really helpful like technical tips and tricks on different components of enterprise. And then the last resource I think that we wanted to highlight is GeoNet. So, you know, get onto GeoNet and join the community, and you can collaborate with others, you can ask questions, and the user community will answer. Also, a lot of times Esri staff are monitoring those threads and will answer as well. Dave, did you have anything to add?
I didn't. I think those are like some of the best resources for ArcGIS Enterprise. And you know, I'm kind of ashamed to admit I didn't realize that the blog had that sort of filter on the right hand side. So thank you for showing me something. Thank you for showing me something new. And also I didn't give you all direct links, but those 3 white papers would be really useful, especially the managed and unmanaged data and the architecting the platform. Those are great resources.
Awesome. Dave,
That was a really cool demonstration. I learned a lot from that. I know that there's something that just came to mind. We have a lot of discussions with users about with existing users about why do I use Enterprise? You know, what would I need Enterprise for, and why how does that help me over ArcGIS Online when I'm using, you know, or just SDE or ArcGIS Server? And there's actually there's another compelling reason that has nothing to do with functionality that we haven't even brought up, and that's licensing. When you use WebGIS, you are either using ArcGIS Online, which, as you know, is managed by Esri, and then you have licenses or logins to access that. And everybody gets logins for all their desktop clients, but you don't get logins for all your users necessarily. You generally have to buy those separately. You know, if you've got people who are going to be doing field work, you'll buy X number of field licenses. The thing with Enterprise is it comes built in with a lot of users already. There are, depending on the version of Enterprise you get a certain number of editors, people who can edit and manage and administer data, and then you get a certain number you get unlimited viewers. So that's huge. The unlimited viewers bit is big for a lot of people because, you know, a viewer in ArcGIS Online is like $100 a year. But if you've got unlimited viewers and you want to share stuff internally, then it may make a lot of sense to use Enterprise for that. So there can be a huge cost savings. And, you know, we focus so much on the functionality capabilities, but rarely on the cost differential. But at any rate, something I just wanted to throw out there. So Shelby, thanks for the awesome demos on some of the collaboration pieces. The sites are, as Shelby mentioned, very similar, same code base as what you're familiar with from OpenData/Hub. So a lot of folks wanting to implement Hub technology can also create internal sites in ArcGIS Enterprise. But these, you know, hopefully you kind of got the impression, you know, we wanted to take a slightly different route. Hopefully you got the impression we were really focusing on the capabilities as opposed to showing you what we normally do, which is sort of like architecting the platform and showing all the components and where they get installed without even really knowing what they do or why they do what they do. So just to sort of review those 4 things, the foundational component is really, it's what all the other Esri applications are connected to. ArcGIS Online is ArcGIS Enterprise running, you know, on Esri's infrastructure. So that the whole portal concept is native to all bits of our technology, and the extension of all the apps are native to all of our technology, and it's flexible, as we talked about, because you have a variety of different architecture and deployment capabilities. It's scalable. One of the ways, one thing we didn't really talk about much is how people scale ArcGIS Enterprise, and typically that's by adding more servers. So you can scale horizontally by adding more servers, or you can scale vertically by adding more capacity, more capability to your existing infrastructure. And then the powerful capabilities, I think of the sharing and being able to do really efficient content management, data management, and all of the powerful server roles you can add onto your license are there. And Shelby just did a fantastic job of showing the collaboration piece. And I think when people see that component on creating an actual collaboration between an ArcGIS Online and Enterprise portals. I think that really just kind of connects a lot of dots. So I'm glad we got to conclude on that. And I think that pretty much concludes our time. I know we went a little bit over and apologize for that. But we do have, if you want to ask questions, feel free to unmute your mic and speak up if you'd like. I notice there's a couple things in the Q&A, not any longer, but there have been. Does anybody have any other questions or things they want to bring up? Well, I think if you don't have anything for us now, you can feel free to reach out to Shelby and I individually if you like. You can email us. Deb, thanks for the comment. Appreciate it. Appreciate all your time today. And Nick, thanks for kicking us off, and thanks for moderating this whole session. I really appreciate it. And
Thanks so much for sticking with us, guys.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, Karen. We appreciate your feedback too. All right.
All right, thank you so much.
Yeah, our pleasure. Our pleasure. We're really excited to be part of this. We wish we could have done it all in person next year, maybe.
Hopefully next year. Well, thanks everyone who attended. Definitely thank you, Dave and Shelby. I found that quite useful and informative. I hope the rest of you did as well. Please remember that the final event for our Elevations Geospatial Summit is going to be our EndNote speech and closing remarks, and that's tomorrow from 10 to 11:30 Mountain Time. So please tune in for that. Thank you to all our sponsors again, and have a good day, everyone.
Thanks. Take care.
Thanks so much. Take care.